Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful. Hello, I'm Anna Davis, and as always, I'm happy to welcome you to the On Farm podcast. This week is the final of 5 episodes we've created with SAOS, Scotland's farmer co-op experts, each one looking at a different aspect of the fight against climate change. We've looked at the targets, we've talked about supply chains, we've heard about the unique challenges that weather changes bring, and today we're talking about leadership. How can effective leadership encourage everybody with a stake in rural sustainability to engage with the fight against climate change? Let's find out from some of the experts.
So my name is Jim Booth. I'm Head of Co-op Development at SAOS. And very simply, my role is to encourage farmers to work together to cooperate, and also to encourage or to support our farm co-ops to grow and to reach their full potential.
Thank you, Jim. Mark, if you don't mind going next.
I'm the Sustainability Director for FirstMilk, which is a dairy farmers cooperative with 700 members based throughout GB.
Thank you very much. Tim?
Tim Wilson, CEO of Aspatria Farmers, which is based in North Cumbria. We're a farmer-owned business, 150 years in existence, so the first agricultural co-op, and our business is very focused around dairy, then beef and sheep farmers and some mixed farms. We're a supply co-op into our members, offering products, and then products are backed up by advice.
Great, thank you very much. Mark, I'm in my little study here with a bit of soundproofing behind me, but it sounds like you're somewhere much more interesting than that. Where are you just now?
Well, I'm on my farm in South Devon, so I'm beside Slapton Ley Nature Reserve, which is where I farm.
And we can hear beautiful bird song and we can see lovely sunshine, so lucky. In Scotland, it's not quite such a nice day, but that's maybe no surprise. Jim, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay. This is the 5th and final episode within a series that we've been doing all about climate change, and we've talked about supply chains, we've talked about the weather, we've talked about different methods and processes that businesses are undertaking in order to improve what they do from a sustainability and climate change perspective. But a slightly broader question for you. The term fight against climate change is the one that's used most often, I think. Why do you think it's so important that the co-op and collaborative sector really owns this fight against climate change and takes it forward?
Well, I think, first of all, I would start by saying that addressing the climate challenge is probably the number one issue facing Scottish agriculture today. So that's the first thing. On top of that, I would say addressing the climate challenge is too large a challenge for an individual farm to tackle alone. So the only way to tackle it is by people working together, is to cooperate. And so for many farmers, I think they're just unsure where to start and what should they do for the best. And one of the best ways to drive change is to provide that leadership role of the co-op sectors, because the co-ops make things happen. They have the leadership, they have the management resource, they have the capability, the capital, and they have the roots. Importantly, they have the roots down to family farms, their members. So have that route, that communication network as well. So it's a great opportunity for farming and a great opportunity for farm co-ops.
And actually, despite the enormity of the challenge, with the last 4 episodes, we have seen a huge amount, or heard, I should say, a huge amount of optimism coming from the people that we've spoken to. It is a big challenge, but people really feel that by working together, they can meet that challenge. So, Mark, I'm going to come to you next, if I may, because speaking of the word optimism, FirstMilk have set themselves quite an optimistic challenge, haven't they, when it comes to reducing the carbon footprint of your members. Can you tell us a bit more about the details of that challenge?
Yes, thanks very much, Anna. I mean, we've kind of been working on this for some time. We've both had feedback from both sides of the supply chain. One would be from our customers who are looking for all of their suppliers to actually come out with when they're going to be net zero, because again it's leading from consumer questions. But we've also had demand from our members who've said, look, we're getting an awful lot of pressure here, and actually it's like it seems that we're the villains. Actually, it's like from a point of view, from the farmer's point of view, and are saying, look, what can we do about it? So we've conducted a lot of research in this area, and actually far from being villains, we can kind of now demonstrate that certainly our members can actually be part of the climate solution. As far as what we've announced is how we're going to provide tools for them to actually be able to do that. So yes, it's kind of matching both ends, and I think as Jim's alluding to, it's really important we address this as collectively. It isn't for one individual. And we're going to push this right out throughout of our business, so employees will be involved as well. It's got to be across universal.
So am I right in saying then your target is to reduce the carbon footprint of your members by 50% by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2040? Is that right?
That's correct. Actually, it's so we're going to do that in 2 ways. One is by reducing emissions, actually in the first instance, but also there's a fantastic opportunity because we effectively is a predominantly a grass-based system with over 2/3 of the land is down to permanent pasture. So there's fantastic opportunities to actually sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It's quite an opportunity for us to be able to demonstrate that we can do that.
As Jim hinted at, none of your members can do that and hit that target on their own. They need the leadership from you. So how are you going to actually sort of take forward that leadership and help them towards that target?
Well, what we found has been the most successful is in the past is learning from each member, learning from each other as well. So we'll put on workshops and but we'll identify farms that are demonstrating the best practice. We have over 700 members supplying us, roughly 1/3 in Scotland, 1/3 in England, 1/3 in Wales. Those workshops will take place and with small groups to is to be able to, so they can learn from other members who who are doing these things.
Yes, it's got to be about best practice, I suppose, and demonstration and getting people to really understand on a practical basis what can be done.
The fantastic thing is I think people look at carbon sequestration and they immediately look to trees, but the truth be known is there's more carbon stored in the soils, 4 times more than all the plants and trees put together in the world. So soils, I believe, represents our greatest opportunity here. And it's so secure. Once it's in the soil, it's more secure than it would be in trees, which can be chopped down or burnt, obviously.
Yes, definitely something that's come up repeatedly, actually, during this series. So totally understand where you're coming from. Tim, I don't mean to have left you out for the first chunk of this episode, but just wanted to hear there from Mark and his ambitious targets. What about yourself? What sort of targets have you got in place? And I suppose, crucially, how do you think leadership is going to play a key role in getting your members to further embrace this fight, as we say, against climate change?
I think it's pretty key. Advice to farmers, giving farmers a roadway or a way of engaging with these countervailing forces and pressures that are coming on them is pretty key. There are many opportunities, as Mark said, many untapped opportunities, but at the minute we've got at farm level, we've got farmers who are seeing consumer pressure obviously driving towards net zero, which Mark's reflecting. You've got NGOs and other influencers who are gaining a lot of traction in the press that's making farmers feel a bit disenfranchised. And then, of course, you've got it. All of that has coincided with a change in terms of government support for farmers and moving towards the ELM system, which has not been well communicated, or the advice to farmers is still a bit flaky in terms of how that's going to affect their day-to-day activity. So we see the leadership has really got to come by co-ops, farmer-owned businesses getting together in order to make sure that farmers get the advice they need rather than the advice they can afford, as they need to change their businesses and develop their businesses and improve their businesses going forward. Otherwise, there's going to be a massive disconnect between those who are driving policy at a top level, be it retailers and processors and government, and farmers actually reacting to it.
Yes, and do you think that this leadership and the demonstration shown by yourself and Mark, do you think it will encourage more grassroots farmers to engage with co-ops themselves? Because effectively you're making their lives easier, aren't you, by providing those examples and leadership and practical things like Mark said, workshops and advice. Do you think that's the direction things will go?
Very much, I feel that, very much hope so. You've got to remember that a lot of the advice that goes onto farms these days is coming from a number of providers who are probably not fully trusted by the farmer, because it's been delivered by commercial businesses who probably don't have the farmer's interest at the top of their priorities. So for farmer-owned processors and farmer-owned suppliers, providing products and advice and helping farmers adopt better and more efficient systems, it really needs to come from businesses where I think the farmer's got a stake in those businesses, and obviously the co-op model is ideal for that.
I guess trust is the key word, isn't it? You've got nobody's going to listen to any advice or follow any example if they don't trust who it's coming from, and I guess that's it. Mark, I suppose coming in from the trust side of things, that's why your members will be taking your advice, engaging with your workshops, enacting new strategies and policies on their farm. But actually, I think we need to stop here for a second, because Jim's already said, the farming sector has been seen as the bad guys in all of this. And some people would have you believe that we're starting from scratch here. But of course, we're not. We've got ambitious targets, but your members will have been doing things for many years in the fight against climate change. Can you maybe just give us some examples of what's already been done? Because I think sometimes we've got to stop and give people a pat on the back when they deserve it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think as far as we've seen it, we launched what we termed our FirstMilk pledge last year, which members were voluntarily asked to sign up to it, and which was commitment on grazing, as well as so a commitment to ensure that animals have a life worth living. Also to is building social capital, so interacting with the general public, but also together, and then also working with effectively as consumers. So making sure the farms are actually consumer ready, which is 24/7. So it's really encouraging this, and what we've seen is again the farmers actually really enjoy this opportunity to be able to demonstrate the good work they're already doing. We've talked about biodiversity, and I've certainly seen the instances on farm, and you say, what do you do to enhance biodiversity? And the farmer will actually say, well, actually, I don't do anything, I don't think. But then you talk to them, and they don't cut the hedges every year, they've fenced off waterways, etc. Done massive things to enhance the biodiversity, but they didn't necessarily have the lingo. I believe the same is with regenerative agriculture. The principles of regenerative agriculture, I would say, are good agricultural practice. They're not the way out, things that are sometimes being portrayed as regenerative agriculture. Encouraging plant diversity, efficient use, and is like managing soil and effectively building soil, are things that I would say the majority of our members already do. And then there'll be a few tweaks which we can do to say, well, okay, make sure you keep soil covered. The use of manure, which is a valuable asset on the farm, is making better use of that instead of using bought-in nitrogen. So yeah, I don't see any issue with our members. And we launched this to our membership last week. We'd have spoken to a few hundred via our member meetings, and again, 100% supportive of this initiative, because it gives them the tools to be able to talk to the naysayers, talk to the people who are necessarily saying, well, okay, dairy farming's bad and, cows have got devil's horns, etc. This is a fantastic opportunity, I believe, for our members to have something that they can talk to those people, but also be proud to talk to their families and friends of actually what they're doing to actually be part of the climate solution.
Yes, I totally understand what you mean. And I think I'd maybe even add to that, yes, it's the lingo. Sometimes farmers are doing things that they don't even almost realise that they're doing. I think also farming across the UK, farmers are quite modest, quite humble people. They're not used to shouting from the rooftops about the great things they do. And we're really trying to kind of persuade them to do that, I suppose. Yeah, Jim, I guess along those lines, we're talking to Tim and Mark today and it's fascinating, but they are ultimately just two examples of many, many co-ops in Scotland and far beyond who are leading this fight. Have you got some other examples up your sleeve that you could maybe tell us about co-ops that are really driving things, who are really perhaps managing really successfully to engage their members, just really from your kind of day-to-day engagement with people?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've been working on a project this year called Co-ops and the Climate Challenge. And what we've been doing is scoping out co-ops to recognise what co-ops have done already. We're not starting from base from now. What we've found in that piece of work, that research, is that, of course, each co-op is different, but they're on a journey. And in summary, in general, the marketing co-ops are probably further down the road because, as you know, there's two drivers. It's the driver coming out from Scottish Government in terms of the ambitious climate change targets. But the other driver, as Mark alluded to, which is actually probably the most important just now, is really coming from the market, the consumers. And so the marketing co-ops, all our marketing co-ops are already down that road. They're already addressing sustainability, they're recording their sustainability, doing things to provide evidence of reducing their emissions from their members and from their processes, where perhaps further back in the supply chain, the input supply co-ops are only starting this journey. So there's a big difference between the two there. But there's just loads of examples all through our co-op sectors of what co-ops are doing, what farmers have done as well. Improvement in grassland management. There's been huge strides. There's a huge potential in terms of grass, making better use of grass. And that has been a huge improvement over the last 5-10 years, making better use of clover, better use of inorganic manures, farmyard manures and slurry. In the arable sector, precision farming, it's been a revolution in the arable sector. So precision farming, we're working in smart sensor technology as well. So technology will be part of the solution. And of course, farmers have been very good at uptaking in terms of renewable energy and animal health as well. Lots of good work in terms of animal health. So loads of great examples across the whole industry.
Certainly are. Yeah, thank you, Jim. We could probably talk for hours if we went into more detail, couldn't we? Tim, I wonder if I could come to you on this next question. Today I've been preparing, because I'm doing a presentation this week for the Young Farmers Clubs about how best they can engage with the media. Jim kind of reminded me then when he talks about smart technology. Now, we all assume, partly correctly, partly not, we all assume that it's the younger generation who are more willing to adapt smart technology because they understand it better. But in more general terms, how do you think we need to work with the next generation and the younger generation in this climate change fight? Do you think they are the ones who we need to learn from and rely on?
Undoubtedly. That's always a constant challenge in farming, is to make sure that the next generation is engaged as soon as possible in terms of how they're going to take the farm forward. There's no point waiting till they're in their 40s and 50s, by which time some of the current practices are probably so deeply embedded that they can't see a different way of doing it. I think a lot of it comes down to good business practice in terms of measuring things, improving and measuring again. Sadly, I think on farm there isn't enough of that. There's far too much that is taken. It's too approximate and it isn't measured, yet there are tools available to help farmers measure things. What I think is often missing is that the spirit is willing and the farmers are very happy to
embrace new technology and bring it on the farm. But what often is lacking is then the on-farm advice to help them then manage it, implement new practices, and then go back and measure it again, and just make sure that they embed a culture of improvement. And we're in a poor situation relative to some of our near European neighbours in terms of the amount of either free or government-funded advice which is available to farmers. And we see that repeatedly. Great enthusiasm for the concept, but it's the actual putting into practice and demonstrating that it's making a material difference to their farm, which is where we're a bit lacking.
You've touched there on effectively one of the barriers to making this happen. Mark, from your perspective, what are the key barriers that co-ops need to help farmers get through in order to be able to meet these tough targets?
Yeah, it's around communicating, actually, as clear guidance and actually messages what we need to do, but also the reasons why we need to do it. We've been trailing the need for climate change with articles from customers, for some time, just to demonstrate the need that we're going to have to act in this area well before we actually get out there. And then it's really as actually assisting members actually in being able to deliver it. Something just picking up on the point you made there about the next generation. We have over 200, members of a next generation group, which is hugely important. And it's not that they're any different. They're clearly from the same businesses, but they are going to be the powerhouse to deliver this. We're talking about ambitions here that go to 2040. In all fairness, these will be the successors who will be delivering this. So we've got a very successful Women in Agriculture group now as well formed, which is all about using the latest technology to communicate. Actually, again, it's just getting the message across universally. So the barrier, I would say, is an understanding necessarily, but it's something we can easily overcome.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. I think you've gone back to the optimism again, which I think is great. That yes, there are barriers, but they can be overcome. Jim, from your perspective, what other obstacles lie in our way that we need to work together to overcome?
Well, I think some of the barriers at farm level, I just think farmers are very time constrained now. So there's an issue about time, there's an issue about complexity, this education, where do I start? Where do I start as well? And, how do I finance it? And I think that really exploits the benefits of cooperation is by people working together, having a common purpose, where the member is the owner as well. So it really builds into the benefits of cooperation to alleviate some of these barriers. But in terms of what do we need to be done, I'm I'm very clear about that. And I think the biggest factor to drive change will be having a sympathetic government policy. A government policy that's doesn't just say it supports farmers working together, cooperation, but actually delivers on that. I don't think to date that Scottish Government has been ambitious enough in terms of driving cooperation. So I'd like to see more done in that, real policy drivers to drive cooperation, to really stimulate, to encourage farmers to work together and to cooperate, to really exploit the advantages, the natural advantages, which are well proven. They're well proven.
Mark, you've got a really ambitious target, and obviously your members work very well together. But what about cooperation between cooperatives? You and Tim, for example, and others, what are you all learning from each other as well as from your members?
Part of a successful rollout for us will be working with our fellow cooperatives, where Tim will have people that would talk to our members and other cooperatives as well, and many other organisations. I shouldn't just say it's cooperatives. It's the message we're putting across, and it's actually principles as much as anything. Yeah, the more we can do together, the better.
Anna, I just wanted to just interrupt there to talk really about at a strategic level, because I think Scotland can't compete internationally, producing commodities. So we have to think differently. We have to differentiate ourselves, and we have to look to add value through premiumisation. And I think in having climate-friendly production is part of that proposition. So I think there's a great opportunity here for Scotland, Scottish Agriculture PLC. And there's that delicate balance to be achieved between reducing emissions and improving our our environmental sustainability whilst at the same time maintaining productivity. We've got to guard against production levels falling, so we're more reliant on food imports, which is simply offshoring our emissions, somewhere else in the world. I also wanted to just add, we don't need every farm business to achieve net zero emissions. That would be really inefficient, and that would lead to a loss of productivity. It's net zero across the whole industry, so that varies with the farm situation, their land use capability, and their own ambition and what they want to do. So you can imagine an upland farm where they have lots of opportunities. They perhaps will do more in terms of tree planting and peatland restoration and maintaining, permanent grass. While in the East Coast and productive land, we really need to ensure that is maintained.
Yes, and you touched on there a topic that's really always close to my heart, which is almost about expectation. That there is that expectation on the farming sector. Consumers are looking for production methods that are taking into account not just the more traditional things like animal welfare, but now consumers want products that are also proven to be working in the fight against climate change. And I think that's critical because with the advent of social media, consumers have got so much more influence and so much more say in what they choose. And we've all got to be listening effectively. Mark, you'll have a fair amount of engagement, particularly on social media, I imagine, with consumers. Do you find that questions are becoming more frequent with regard to production methods and having to justify what you're doing?
Absolutely, Anna. I mean, as far as it's not just the actual UK customers we have. This is from across the world. So we would export to over 26 countries. There is as many questions coming from the Middle East, actually, is like, and further afield of actually overproduction standards. Over 74% of the consumers are concerned about climate change, so it actually backs up previous research. But also 76% would sooner purchase milk from or dairy products from farmers that graze. It's just like, again, it's something that's hugely important. And if you look at the difference in the generations, so the attitudes of various age groups, we need to future-proof our industry. We do need to be so much consumer-led, I believe. Yes, totally agree.
Yes, Tim, you mentioned as well, obviously, that it's all about communication. So what are your thoughts on the ways in which we communicate with our ultimate customers?
The most important thing to start with is being joined up. So that's sounds pretty key. The likes of myself and Mark should be coordinating that and other co-ops in that supply chain. And then this bit horizontally, we need to make sure that my co-op in North Cumbria is giving the same messages to somebody in Southwest Scotland, because we are really only as strong as our weakest link. It's very important that we raise the efficiency and methodologies on farms right across the country. We want to make sure that the consumer is looking on British produce, be it dairy, pig, or arable outputs, as the thing to go for, because it is produced to high standards. It is produced as efficiently as it can be. And I think, as Jim was saying, we stand very good comparison with most other suppliers of most products in the world, I would think. But also, generally, the adherence with best practice and the adherence with standards when it comes to animal welfare or human health issues, it's pretty high. And I think we need to make the most of that and turn what some farmers perceive as an existential threat into an opportunity.
Yes, and in fact, we wouldn't be talking to each other for the podcast today if it wasn't for the fact that we believe these positive messages need to get out there to a wider audience, and we need to use all of the channels at our disposal to be able to do that. That's why the podcast exists. Jim, good leadership is about taking people with you on your journey, isn't it, really? So if there's anybody listening, say they're a farmer but they're not currently involved with any kind of cooperative work or a member of any co-op, what would your message be to them about why you think they should join this journey?
I think that probably the biggest challenge for an individual farm business is they're very fragmented. They're micro businesses in a supply chain. Increasingly, everything is driven by supply chains, and it must be market-led. But in a supply chain, it's becoming increasingly concentrated. And so it's about power and influence. So by joining a co-op, it allows you to be part of something, economies of scale, and have some influence in your supply chain. Admittedly, we're not going to match the power of the major multiples, but you have some scale and you have some influence. The other thing, it's a great route to manage risk, and volatility is one of the biggest challenges for a farm business. And it's a great route to manage risk and volatility and to build resilience and protect family farms. Because some people think that they don't want to cooperate because they feel they're losing their independence. But it's absolutely opposite of that by cooperating, it protects your farm and allows you to have a viable business for the future and to pass it on to your next generation as well. For me, it's a no-brainer. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't cooperate. It's as simple as people working together. It's as simple as that, people working together. And it can be informal neighbouring, informal cooperation, neighbouring, right through to being part of a co-op member. The other thing to say about the co-ops, I think it's really important, unless you're part of that co-op culture, is co-ops are driven by values and principles. And we talk about it and we understand it in the co-op sector, but it's not part of our culture. It's not taught at universities or schools, or it's not part of the normal dialogue. And that principles of cooperation and the values are really, really important. And I think it was Tim or someone said about co-ops are all about people. It's all about communities and it's about people, and that's really important.
Yes, a great answer, Jim. I think you've pretty much summed it up. But I would like to ask the same question to Mark and Tim, actually. Tim, just picking on you, if you might like to go first. Yeah, how do we take more people with us on this journey?
Well, 2 words: trust and leadership. I think farmers are looking for leadership in these areas because they're entering a period of time where there's lots of countervailing forces, and I think we should absolutely see that as a key driver. And the other one is trust. You've used the word earlier, but making sure we establish businesses with the expertise that they can trust to give them the best possible advice on how to deal with the issues that are facing their businesses. If we do that, then I think it is a no-brainer. People will naturally gravitate towards the co-op model because that's where they both get leadership and trust. But we've got to make sure that we're in a position where we've got the funding to bring those people into the business who can demonstrate that's the farmer. Because in most cases, it doesn't come down to the written word; it comes down to a conversation with somebody who actually delivers value for you.
Yes, Mark, 2 pretty comprehensive answers there. But if you've got anything to add to that,
I think as far as we need to demonstrate success, it's nothing better than if you've got people going out and actually talking about their pride in belonging to a cooperative and actually what the cooperative is doing for them. For that to take place, they've got to actually have pride in it and actually feel part of it. So this actual sense of belonging, hugely important, and they go out as ambassadors, encourage others to actually do the same.
The phrase I would use is co-ops make things happen, Anna. Cooperation will fast-track that change, the change that's needed to transform Scottish agriculture.
Definitely. So final question then for you all, if you don't mind. I'm not going to be cruel and ask you to predict exactly what's going to be happening in 2045, but perhaps if we can just jump ahead 9 years and imagine that the 4 of us are recording a podcast in 2030. What do you think we will be saying in 2030 when we're talking about this topic?
I'd like to think we'll be saying that we've seen 10 years of farmers really embracing change, improving their businesses in terms of efficiency, because that's the key measure or that's the key thing that's required in order to reduce their impact on the climate. I would like to think that consumers are far more in tune with the good things that farmers do and not the bad things they're doing. Quite how fast we're going to achieve that is whether 10 years is enough of a timescale. I would fear in all these things, and looking at agriculture in the last 50 years, that the pace of change is probably never as fast as we'd like it to be.
Mark, what will you be saying to me in 9 years' time, do you think?
That FirstMilk farmers are well ahead of their target to have reduced by 50%. I think the other thing as well is what I'd like to actually is you be seeing is that more people are actually members of cooperatives and actually taking an active part more and more people are actually seeing that, we can be part of the climate change solution.
Thank you, yes. Jim, finally.
The first thing I would say, we shouldn't underestimate the scale of the challenge. The Scottish Government's climate change plan, they had an update in December. The speed of change for this next 10 years till 2030 has to be 4 times faster than what we've achieved for the last 28 years. So we shouldn't underestimate the scale of the challenge. If we're going to achieve the targets they're looking for 75% reduction in emissions. But in 10 years' time, I hope we will be well down that road. It's a great opportunity. It's really, really exciting. I just feel we're on a great cusp of change. Everything is really aligned. The pandemic, in a sense, has actually had a renewed interest in terms of food, the importance of food in terms of health and sustainability as well. And that's been a great platform to build on. We just need to get everybody and we have a unique position in Scotland because advantage of being relatively small, of all the organisations who are involved in agriculture and the rural sector, just working together, pulling the same direction, we could achieve a lot, and it's just so exciting. I just think there's great opportunities. But admitting that, I would still say the biggest thing that needs to be done is a sympathetic agricultural policy, really to fast track it. And I'd really love Scottish Government to be much more bolder ambition to encourage change and the drive towards cooperation. There was a great example in Australia called Future Farming Programme. And it's just amazing what it's been done. And it just needs that vision from government policy and resource to make change happen. So that's my last bit. It's a plea really to Scottish Government. It's a great opportunity.
I've got a foot in both camps, in both Scottish agriculture and the English agricultural scene, and I do think Jim is correct. I think there's far more cohesion in Scotland. Scotland has got the opportunity to probably demonstrate to the bigger English market what good joined up thinking looks like, and I'm very much hoping the co-ops in Scotland are seen as a bit of a beacon to have driven that forward. I do fear in England it is going to be a far more difficult task. It's far more disparate, and the cooperative sector is probably not as well joined up as it is in Scotland. So very interested to see how that progresses.
And I think as far as what we've taken as we're going to take the bull by the horns, excuse the pun. I don't think we can wait for others necessarily, and the governments in particular, for this to happen. Take charge of our own destiny is what we found is to be the most successful, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
But ultimately, working together in collaboration as part of a co-op makes things happen. So let's make this happen. In addition to Mark, Jim and Tim, I should like to thank every contributor who has taken part in this 5-part series in association with SAOS. Sadly, I can't name you all again today, but you know who you are and we are very grateful. Thank you. SAOS are Scotland's experts on farmer co-ops and food industry collaboration, and they work with food and farming businesses to make them more profitable, competitive and sustainable. This series, which began back in November 2020 and finishes today, has shown us how collaboration is critical in the fight against climate change. No man, woman or indeed farmer is an island, and reaching net zero by 2045 is not something that any of us can manage alone. Of course, much work, much thinking and many positive achievements have already taken place on the road to net zero. However, in order to progress down that road at pace, strong leadership, collaboration throughout supply chains and farmers working together are what's needed to lead the farming sector towards this challenging, but I believe achievable goal. All 5 of the SAOS episodes are available on both the on-farm feed and on the SAOS website, which, for those who don't know, is www.saos.coop, which is COOP. And we are also working on what's known in the industry, the podcasting industry that is, as a supercut of all 5 episodes to summarise just how critical the role of SAOS is in this challenge. I truly believe that every single one of us in the agri and food sectors has a responsibility to contribute towards net zero, and so my plea to you today is just simply to share this episode and all the others in the series with as many people as you can. You know that listening to a podcast is easy and straightforward, but your neighbour or an older relative might think it's complicated. Perhaps you could just show them and get them to listen too. Next week, we've teamed up once again with the Scottish Government, and we're hearing some of the amazing community and rural economy success stories that have come about from the LEADER funding programme. Remember that the On Farm podcast is brought to you by Scene&HerdPR and Marketing. If you need a new brand or logo, a new website, social media management, or indeed advice on any type of communications, we're the people to speak to, so just get in touch for an informal chat. Until next time, take care.